Welcome back. In this video, I want to look at a smaller mixing board, the Mackie Mix8, and apply some of the feedback techniques that I've been demonstrating to a slightly smaller mixing board. I think that even though this has a lot fewer routing options than the 1202 that I've been using in all of the other videos in this series, there's still a lot of interesting things that we can do to patch this mixing board using the exact same principles that we've been using in the other videos. A quick note before we get started. Safety is always important when using feedback loops or doing no input mixing. You should protect your ears, your speakers, and your equipment. I don't put my headphones or my speakers directly into the mixing board, but instead I run them through some other device. In this case, I have a Zoom H5 that I'm recording into. It can handle the levels that come out of the mixing board just fine and attenuate them with easy control for my headphones or my speakers. Second, it's important to just remember where your main volume knob is on the mixing board. If at any point things are getting out of control, you take your main output, turn it all the way down, cut all output from your mixing board out of your final outputs. Let's look at the Mackie Mix8 and see what we have here. We have two mono channels with preamps, 1 and 2. We have two sets of stereo inputs, 3, 4, 5, 6. For each of these channels, 1 through 6, we have our 3-band EQ, one aux send, panning left and right, and a level control. And then we have two sets of outputs, the main left and right and the control room left and right outputs. Now, on the 1202, the control room outputs have a bit of flexibility in what signals you can get out of them separate from the main outputs. On the Mix8, the control room outputs are more or less the same as the main mix, just with an additional volume knob. And for this reason, I actually think that the control room outputs are the most compelling to use as our outputs for the mixing board overall. I've also chosen to go out just in mono here as opposed to stereo, because that lets us use the left and right inputs, the left and right outputs much more freely as separate channels, rather than having to consider how we're hearing them in our left and right ears, respectively. So let's create some feedback loops with the Mix8. I always like to start with the aux sends. I think that they're very flexible routing options on a mixing board that has them. I'm going to take the preamp, the channel level, the aux master, set those all to unity, turn up our main mix volume, and as I turn the aux send up, we're going to start sending the output from this channel out of the aux send and back into the channel to create a feedback loop. As we approach unity, we should start to oscillate and get some noise. There we go, we can see it. And now you can see, we can monitor this on the main mix, but we'll only start hearing it when we turn up our control room outputs that we're monitoring out of. And that's actually a really nice tone that we're getting. It's rich and bassy. As a starting point, I actually really like that. But we can play with the EQ to change our pitch a little bit. Let's hear that. So what other outputs do we have on the Mix8? We have the main left and right. So let's run those into channel 3 and channel 5 on our inputs here, and see what kind of feedback we can get as we turn up main. To feedback loops. And right now, because they're both panned center, both are mixing into one feedback loop. You can hear that we can get a stable tone, but on the left channel, but as we turn up the right channel, we're affecting the singular overall feedback loop that we have. Now, if we start to split these out, left and right, we now have two separate loops, so that left is running entirely to left and back out left, right is running entirely to right and back out right. As I turn up the right, we won't hear anything because we're only listening out of left, which is actually really exciting because we can use the right panning as a type of feedback loop that we can't hear but can route elsewhere to start to influence things. And then if we turn up left, we can hear it, and turning up right will not affect what we're hearing at all. As we start to maybe bring some of the right channel back towards the left, we can control exactly how much of this right channel we're bringing into the left channel or vice versa. Let's play around with this a little bit. One more thing that we haven't done yet is to look for noise channels on this. And I found with a little bit of experimentation on the Mix8 that the amount of amplification that we can get on these preamps is pretty noisy just by itself. I'm going to reset our other channels and just listen to channel 2, which has nothing plugged into it at the moment. I'm going to turn up the preamp all the way, turn up the level, you can hear with these turned all the way up that we're getting a little bit of sound there. But as soon as we start to run this into the aux channel for a little more additional amplification, we're going to get a really nice audible noise. So we have a noise channel here. I'm going to take that noise and run it back into the aux send. And I'm going to start to put some feedback into that. We can get a nice resonant channel running some noise into that, which means that we can probably also ping it very nicely as well. Let's get some feedback up on our right channel that we can't hear. Start to route a little bit of that. Listen to how nice and slow we can drive that sub-audio pulse. Really nice. I think this about wraps things up for my approach to the smaller mixing board. If you have ways of patching a smaller mixing board that you would like to share in the comments, please let me know. I would love to hear what other people are doing with mixing boards of this size. I'm going to leave off with a little bit of final exploration, see if I can find any other interesting states for this, and play around with the sounds on it for a little while. Hope you have a good day.